Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on WYSL, WACK out in Newark, and all of our friends listening online. Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, the Kevin Wilson pages, or the podcast, wherever you listen today. Thank you so much for joining us. And today, I'm lucky enough to have my friend Sahar back on the show, who's been on before. Some of you may have remembered listening to him. Oh, was it like a year ago last year? You're on. So Sahar, who's now the co-founder and executive director of the Integrity Institute, is here to talk to us today about social media. And I kind of titled this, how do we make social media better? How do we make it more ethical? Are there ways to do that? Is it possible to make social media less of a dumpster fire? I know I'm
Yes.
putting it provocatively. Yes. Oh yes. Okay. All right. Problem solved. Cool.
Yeah.
So done then, right?
Let's talk about Battlestar Galactica in our remaining, hour we have.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. No. Let's talk about this. First of all, let's tell me, our audience, a little bit more about yourself and the Integrity Institute and what you're doing there and what your goals are.
Word. Well, hello, audience. My name is Sahar Masachi. I was born in, Israel, and moved to Rochester, New York when I was 2 years old because of war and violence in the Middle East. I spent all my childhood in Rochester and went back as an adult and lived there for a few years. And so my parents were refugees from Iran when they were kids, and they went to the only country that would take them, Israel. And when I was 2 years old, sort of during the Gulf War, we were sort of half refugees, half, economic opportunity reasons, moved to the U.S. And growing up, those two stories really instilled in me the sense of you might not care about the news, but the news cares about you. But also, I was good at computers. And how do you do both computers and caring about the world at the same time? It's pretty hard. So had a lot of adventures in my life, tried a lot of stuff, and I ended up being in this weird place where I saw sort of the rebirth or the new birth of this whole set of type of job called integrity work, which is trying to keep people safe and manage social media platforms. And in short, the world deserves access to that knowledge. And the stuff that we learned, the stuff that people like that do, is the sort of stuff that should both be transparent and accountable to the world, but also the level of discussion and the sort of stuff we're talking about is so different than the things that people often talk about. And it's useful, vital, practical knowledge that the world deserves to hear as well. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And so you're trying to, again, talk about the ways in which, the social media platforms develop these systems of ethics and safety on those platforms, making sure that process is transparent so people understand it. And you had said that it's different from many of the ways that people understand it. Can you talk about some of those ways in which it's different than how people understand what the work you've done has been?
Yeah. Gosh, how long do I have? So I just had, I've been working on this piece for over a year, and kept polishing it, looking for the right place to publish it, and it finally published. It came out in the MIT Tech Review, and it's called something like, if social media is a city, how do we govern it? Something like that. Shame on me for not remembering the exact title.
Right. And then it's how to save our social media by treating it like a city.
That sounds right.
The one? Yeah, no, I got pulled up. Don't worry, I come prepared to these interviews sometimes.
And the basic idea there is like, when people talk about how to do this kind of work, first of all, they think the work is centered around content moderation, right? And you might call these the content cops, the people who manually look at a post or a behavior and say, like, this is bad, Facebook jail, Twitter arrests, shadow banning, shadow moderation, whatever it is. That's important, but it really is like the last line of defense. It's not the first. And the first line of defense is I mean, you can think about it like this: like, why don't you see many ads for fake Ray-Bans on, or spam about fake Ray-Bans on Facebook anymore? The reason is there is a team that thinks about what is spam, how do you fight it, what does a fake account look like, and stops people from making billions of fake accounts like a day or something. It's like a ridiculous number. So if you take a step beyond that, there are other teams like the team I was on that think about, well, like, what are the base rules of this whole system that we're creating? And so things like, how many friends requests should you be able to send per day? Like, even like Reddit has an upvote and a downvote system that has value and creates certain dynamics. And the question is, how do you set up the system in a way that the positive dynamics happen and that the negative dynamics happen less often? And it's more shaping and like setting the structures for a healthy information ecosystem or a healthy sort of society or city, rather than trying to solve the problem with, like, content moderators who are judge, jury, executioner, uh, uh, giving people speeding tickets when there's no rules and there's no real like guidelines of if you're towing the line or if you're breaking Facebook law. That's the kind of stuff that I'd rather talk about, and I think that people just sort of miss out on.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting again, like creating those. As you kind of call them like more physical barriers, right? If you're in a real city, like you can't do the same things in terms of like spreading a message around, right? Like, you are limited by your capacity to like literally hang up a poster or talk to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on a platform like social media, though, like you can clone yourself, be in a million places at once, and post a million times if there's no actual restriction against that. And I know there are systems that do some of that, but being transparent about what those systems are is also important, so people don't get frustrated too about like, hey, I'm just trying to post in a couple groups like with like an event that's happening, and I know
Mm-hmm.
like in people get shut down for that too. Like it happens in my party politics all the time, because like, all right, we got a statewide event and there's like 20 different groups that like need to know this message, and I'm going to go and post all of them at once, and then Facebook says,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we've banned you from posting in groups for 48 hours, and you're like, oh, what the heck. But it's interesting that you bring that up, and talking about that rather than like just the content, because that can feel really subjective to people, right? Like, and you're like, why did this happen to me? Who made this decision? And how is that fair? And again, I think you're right. That's what most people think about, like in terms of the work you do. Is like they see that on that end. Like, I posted this thing, and then Facebook said that I can't post anymore because of this thing, right? But that's not really
Mm-hmm.
the bulk of what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember ever working on that at all.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Well,
and
the bulk of like the kind of
mhm,
broad spectrum of
yeah,
what your profession is, right? Like it's not really
mhm,
just about that.
yeah. Um, and I remember you asked me about what the institute is. I didn't really answer that question. I don't know if you want
Mhm.
me to answer it now or later.
Please do.
So you have these people. They have this new-ish. It's not actually new, but let's say it's new job, where they have on one hand a lot of power because they get to like work on these systems. On the other hand, very little power because their bosses keep stopping them from doing the right thing. And also access to this knowledge that the world desperately wants, which is, how do we even think about this? Like, how do you solve the problems, right? Like, uh, we're a society. We don't even know what we want. We want things to be better, but we don't know how. Um, and what we do is we gather them from all the different companies, and there's at this point tons of platforms and uh, small ones, big ones, uh, and get them talking to each other. So the first thing we do is build that community. The second thing we do is nurture and identify and grow the knowledge that this community has into sort of a new theory and practice. And we go from just like a bunch of people with opinions to, oh yeah, we're all on the same page on this, or
Fantastic.
this
Well,
is a fault line.
I'm gonna have to cut you off a little bit
Yeah.
because we are heading out on break. But when we come back, let's get more specific. Like, what sort of like work you're engaging with, and like what sort of like stuff you're putting out there. Again, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes with Sahar from the Integrity Institute. Talk to you then.
Are we still
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'll edit this out anyway. I just like to have like a moment of silence in there so I can like know easily. Okay, like this is where segment one ends, and I don't have to like look around for it.
Huh.
Yeah. So this part not going to be in the radio broadcast, but it will be in the online broadcast. So
Okay.
if if you're going to do any trash talking, know that that's still going to go in the actual
Wow,
show.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
You're about to trash talk.
It's just always good to know. Like,
Yeah, right.
is swearing allowed? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like this section, like you could swear. I mean, like try not to swear in the actual show because like then they have to edit that shit. So don't do
I try not to be a sweary guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's one thing that about this show that always trips me up is it's unclear to me how long you want me to talk. Do you want me to talk in 30-second chunks, like 2 or 3 minute chunks?
Listen, it's if I feel like I need to interrupt you, I will. Don't worry about it. I appreciate if you are talking more because folks hear me several days a week. It's good to mix it up with hearing someone else talk. I invite you on this show so you can talk, not so I can talk. Drives me nuts when I listen to shows when it's just the host talking the whole time.
Okay. I'll put less value on brevity.
Yeah, I mean, do what you want. Whatever makes you comfortable.
I mean, I did feel like I cut myself off a lot. So
no, I mean it's good to like this format's a little bit longer, right? It's like a different than like a podcast we have an hour and a half, right? So like we get to talk a little bit more, but I have to cut you off at like those 10-12 minute spots. But it's different than like if you end up on like CNN or something like, all right, you got like 60 seconds to state your opinion in between people yelling at you. Yeah. So you got to be super concise. But all right. Yeah. Anyway, so let's plan to go back in at 13 minutes, and that will mean that we have until 25 minutes.
Okay. And I think I'll lead off is just like an overview of the Institute. Like mission, vision, structure, goals. Does that work for you?
Heck yeah. Love it.
Yeah. Battlestar Galactica.
That's, still a good show. Heard they're remaking it. We'll see. Wow. I know how I feel about it.
Nothing ever is allowed to die.
Exactly. Just leave it be. It's good. Just leave it be. All right. Coming back in 10 seconds. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we're talking with Fred Sahar from the Integrity Institute, and we're talking about what the Institute does, what its goals are, and how do we make social media better. And it's not just content moderation; it's a whole bunch of different stuff to make the social media experience better, and bringing transparency to that process is part of what you do. But let me not talk anymore. Sahar, tell us a little bit more about like what you guys are doing over there.
Oh yeah, so this is the info dump part of the program. So integrity professionals are the people who deal with this all day, who aren't trying to like squeeze more engagement or profit or just like eyeballs out of social media, but actually are given the opportunity to think about like how do we stop abuse, how do we make things better. We gather them into a community and have them actually meet each other and swap tips. So project number 1 is build that community. Project number 2 is go from a collection of people with opinions to a body of knowledge. Like what is this new thing? What does it believe? What are the sort of emerging physics that we're all seeing on all different platforms, like a sort of universal physics? And project number 3 is sharing that with the world. And the world, sounds a little fuzzy, so let's be specific. It's the companies themselves, especially small companies, who don't have access to like the ability to hire giant integrity teams and marinate them for years in data to like get this understanding. It's the big companies where we're also we can give them insights might not have or like help their office maneuvering of like, hey, these outside experts said that this is the right thing to do. It's nonprofits, it's journalists to help them do journalism better and like actually understand better what they're talking about, and as policymakers. And again, we're not lobbyists. We don't really have any consensus goals as an institute of what policy we want to see, but we're experts. You know, we're the like physicist who's there to say like, all right, you want to like regulate or understand this thing, like here's how it actually works. Let's like give you more understanding of the system that you are attempting to mess with. And that's what we do. And it's working really well.
Right on. Well, so a couple questions that process brings up, right? Is one, so you start to talk about like what I might consider trade-offs, right? Like, and again, I work in the advertising side. Like most of my day
Mhm.
job is like getting eyeballs in front of social media, but I'm not opposed to like this type of stuff, right? Like if I get a whole bunch of like vanity metrics in social media, and because it's filled with bots and because there's people acting unethically on there, that doesn't really help me actually, get a small business to be able to sell more of their product, right? But can you talk a little bit more about those trade-offs and why it's important to keep that process separate? You said that people want more eyeballs, more engagement, more profits out of these social media institutions versus like what you need to do, and why is it important to have a separate kind of set of people advocating for the integrity side?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Like, should they be separate, right? Like, should it be its own little own department, or should it be infused in everything the company does? I don't really know. That's an interesting question of organizational design. I think that traditionally they have been sort of separated for a variety of reasons. And one thing that's given us is the ability to, say this is an emerging kind of job and build this identity. And I think that like being separate has hurt in a lot of ways, but it also has helped us sort of like, again, like get enough critical mass to start having this as like a specialized form of knowledge.
Hmm.
Um, and I think of it kind of like security, like cybersecurity. There's a sense that like you want in a company the security people to have their own team so that they can worry about the really fancy stuff. But you also want them to talk to every part of the company and like make things secure by default, right? So use this programming language construct instead of a different construct because the first one is just like leads itself to security holes. Or we're going to uh, make these programs that scan your code and tell you if it has vulnerabilities, because it should be everyone's job to make secure code, not just ours. Um, you can imagine some sort of hybrid like that would happen. As for why, I guess what you're really asking though is why should companies care about this, right?
That too. Yeah.
I mean, well, first of all, it's the right thing to do, and uh, it's important to say first, but it's important to move on to the the other
Right. Yeah,
answers.
no, that seems like it should be good enough, right? But,
Mhm.
what are the other reasons?
Uh, so so TikTok's value model leaked the other day,
Yeah.
and their value model is sort of like a function that it's like a what when they decide which video to show you, what are the things they take into account? And the things they take into account are things that you might expect, like would you watch it? Would you share it? Right? And that comes from have you watched and shared stuff from this creator previously, right? Like all the standard stuff that you would expect.
Right. Yeah.
But they also have this thing that's about like ecosystem value, as far as I understand. And as I understand it, it's something like I'm a little old, so I don't know who's cool these days. But let's pretend that Justin Bieber is still cool.
Sure.
You can imagine a world in which Justin Bieber posts on TikTok, and he always goes to the top of everyone's feed because, like, he's so famous, people will definitely watch it, whatever. Um, but if this goes on for too long, then you're gonna stop making TikToks yourself because how can you compete with Justin Bieber? And all of a sudden, it goes from a thriving community of creators to just like Justin Bieber and I don't know Kim Kardashian or whoever making TikToks and everyone else enjoying them. That's it.
Hmm.
And so it's in the long term interest of the company to sort of uh, bake into their design things that don't increase their short-term metrics, but will keep them like long-term viable and healthy. And you can make a case for integrity work as that. It's the stuff that you do that is more long-term, that stops your platform from being overrun by fake accounts, from being a place where people just like yell at each other. Um, think of like the worst caricature of Twitter, of just like, like just everyone just like aggressively, I don't know, canceling, yelling at each other, everyone's in bad faith, whatever. Like,
Mhm.
presumably you don't want that because that drives users away. And this is how you sort of like nip that in the bud. In the same way that like you're throwing a party, and the reason that you like care about, I don't know, keeping these two people away from starting a fight or something is, even though the fight makes the party really cool in the next like 10 minutes, like, it's gonna ruin the party.
Right. Yeah. Eventually that gets exhausting. People don't want to stay
Mm-hmm.
at the party anymore. And then,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool. They watched the fight, but now they're like, all right, I'm done with this. I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's a really interesting way to do that, right? It's not just about like, not just the short-term thinking of like, hey, like we can get all this engagement and like sell ads on this engagement now. But like what happens when people get tired of that? Either because you misprioritize like certain creators over others and don't give other creators a chance to thrive, or because there's so much conflict on a platform or other like frustrating behavior on the platform
Mm-hmm.
that people don't want to stay for the long term, right? And so what happens to your profitability, your success a few years down the line, which I know like Facebook and Instagram are already starting to get worried about, because they're worried about younger users leaving the platform. And they're like, well, how do we do this other than copy TikTok right now? But how do we like make sure that people
Mm-hmm.
want to be here?
And it's like so I particularly care about like the impact of society, right? And like
Right.
how does this destroy us? But also like look at plagiarism, right? If is a platform, let's say like a platform was really lax about plagiarism, and people just re-uploaded stuff from other platforms, it would give you this big, it would give you content that was more likely to be viral for free, which is good in the short term. But it also, again, means that like your indigenous creators of content are competing against like the best things that are scraped from Reddit or Twitter or whatever. And the indigenous creators of content just give up. And all of a sudden, again, you're like a ghost town. Like there's a lot of like I really care about, you know, uh the social, civic, and political fallout from doing this job badly or not
Yeah.
allowing this job to happen. But also, I think it's in the platform's best interests to not eat their seed corn.
Right. I mean, so well, like when you're talking with these platforms, you're talking with these teams,
Mm-hmm.
both the big folks and also like emerging social platforms, right? Like that's an important part to consider, right? And again, why do we do this? Not just because like it's good, okay, maybe by your values, sir, but but
Mm-hmm.
also like because it's for their best health. And I don't want to like ignore like the civic side, which I know is
Mm-hmm.
really important to you. Like uh in the next like 90 seconds, do you want to just talk about like some of those other challenges that you see on the social side?
Yeah, I mean, just like there's enough news coverage of it that you could like find out about this if you wanted to. Like people in foreign countries are pretending to be American, they're making pages that are pretend American and becoming the biggest pages on, let's say, Facebook. And then they're influencing American political movements and discussion from the inside. It's like literal spies are like pretending to be us and like making us hate each other and like changing our opinions about things. It's bad. And it's
Yeah.
and it's not just the US. Like there's like lynchings in India. There's like civil war in places that is arguably fueled by social media. Um, and it's getting worse.
Right. And I we don't have time to fully dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to like poke back a little bit at like the Facebook pages thing, because
Mm-hmm.
and we'll give you the break to think about this
Yeah.
question. Like, isn't that just speech though? And why shouldn't we let that go? Can't people decide for themselves whether or not that information is valuable and useful? And then where do you draw the line where it's not, and make the physical limitations where you have to change that behavior? All right, again, thanks for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Again, with Sahar from the Integrity Institute. Thanks again for joining us. Talk to you soon. Yep. Okay. And so, yeah, we'll lead off with that question, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the hows.
Yeah.
Instead of just the whys.
Man, what is a good answer to that question? It just feels so obvious to me. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
Something like, this Pakistani intelligence agency is lying to you.
How do I know that the Pakistani intelligence agency doesn't have my best interest in mind? So, all right, why are you making assumptions about that? Yeah, no, I mean, you got an extra minute to think about it.
Yeah.
We'll go back at 27. Oh man. Hopefully you can't hear my son. I can hear him. I don't know if it's being picked up by the mic. Okay,
not
that's
at all.
good. He's not he's having a good time playing with his object permanent boxers. Basically, you drop a ball into a hole and it comes out. And babies are very excited about this stuff. So he's yelling and screeching over that in a fun way.
That's amazing.
All right. And yeah, and then this, like I said, after we talk about this question, I do want to get more into like the hows, you know, and the like more the type of speed bumps that they're kind of appropriate for. He said driving tests and speed bumps. What does that actually mean?
I actually use the phrase bar mitzvahs, but they changed it in editing.
Oh, did they? Well, you can use that if you want. All right, come back. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're joining us on WYSL, WACK out in Newark, or anywhere you're listening online, a Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, or the Kevin Wilson pages and the podcast too. Wherever you're listening today, thank you for being here. Love that you guys are listening to the show. And today, again, we're talking with Sahar, who is from the Integrity Institute. And yeah, we're talking about before the break, we're talking about like the you know, intelligence agencies or like the Russians who are going and creating like these Facebook pages. And, you know, like you'd see the stuff where I'd be like, you know, Trump loves Jesus, and, you know, that sounds like an exaggeration. It's really not, but they would have like God and the devil arm wrestling over whether or not Trump would win the election type of stuff. And then stuff like that would happen on the left too. So there's all these pages that would get super great engagement, and they try to like make rallies and stuff, try to have like a real life impact on this. But, you know, the question is that worth going after? Isn't that just speech in some way? Like why should we be concerned with that sort of action just because foreigners are the ones doing it?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, the examples that you're using are, you know, I think from like 2016, and it's like gotten worse. So we'll get back to that. But also, when people ask this question, I think that typically the person answering it says something like, well, I love free speech, but XYZ. And I'd like to say, I love free speech with some more context, period. And, you know, not just like sort of hand wave it. So in defense
what's
of free
that?
speech,
What's that phrase? Like, you know, anything that comes before but is BS. That's
yeah.
So maybe you love free
ignore.
speech, and you know,
or it's like, what is free speech, and like, why do we care about it, right? And I think like it's part of what makes this country great, and it's our commitment to free speech is a little distinct among countries, and I think it's something that's like actually pretty radical and worth fighting for. So free speech is the idea, is both a amendment in the Constitution and also a broader idea about how one should conduct their lives and order their society, that says that it is not good to allow people to say what they believe to be the truth and not harm them or like, you know, arrest them or destroy them for speaking, because for many reasons, but one reason that's pertinent today is, you know, there but the grace of God go I. And this is a way for us to be able to live in a society without attacking each other. And also, it turns out that like a lot of speech that is unpopular turns out to be true. And the ACLU was founded by people who wanted free speech for people to found unions, and were worried about like McCarthyism, or like the proto-McCarthyism. That's important to remember. Like, I think that free speech is a really important American value that we should celebrate and shore up, as opposed to sort of like make exceptions to. And here is why what I'm talking about is, I think, the best way to approach this problem and also respect free speech. I think that a lot of conversations about how to deal with the internet, especially in the US, talk about, well, the free speech issue. And as a matter of law, I think it's rather murky, right? Like, companies have the free speech ability to do whatever they want on their own platforms, blah, blah, blah. But as I think as a matter of values, we have this sort of American idea that no one should get in the way of you frankly expressing what you want, right?
Right.
And the free speech of like the person is more important than the free speech of the corporation. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, and like this debate comes up to like, okay, so Facebook, they can technically kind of regulate some of their platforms, or Twitter, whoever, right? But as a cultural value, we still would say like I should be able to say what I want, right? And that doesn't totally free you from the consequences of that. And so like legally, even if these social media platforms can say no, that's not allowed on our platform, a lot of people feel strongly that they should be able to do that anyway because we have the cultural value of free speech, and that even outside of government enforcement of that should still apply in social situations as well.
Yeah. And so, holding that in my hand, you currently do not have the free speech to be able to like text Mark Zuckerberg's phone, in the middle of the night whenever you want. You don't have the ability to post on his wall. You don't have the ability to like, I don't know, call up like Kim Kardashian, to use her name again. Not because like the content of your speech is the problem, but because the way the system has been designed, right? Like the telephone system, or the like Facebook wall system, or like texting, um, you know, makes some things hard and makes other things easy. And that's the only way that you could survive, right? Like,
Mhm.
imagine throwing to use a city metaphor again, like 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people in a high school gym, and saying, all right, go at it, have a conversation.
I
It would
mean,
be terrible.
that sounds like Twitter. That's
Like, you wouldn't get anything out of it. But if you took the same number of people and put them in like, classrooms of 20 people each, right? And had them have a conversation, and maybe like have a report of their conversation that goes to a larger, whatever, some sort of tiered structure. It doesn't really matter. Point is, like, you can have better conversations that way, because just the way that people, like, you can't talk to 1,000 people at once.
I mean, isn't there like a positive democratization effect of that? Like when Donald
Mhm,
Trump was on Twitter, for instance, like we can speak directly to the president in a sense, right?
mhm.
Like in a way we didn't have access to before. And aren't there some benefits to that?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think actually, like, Twitter is not a giant high school gymnasium of everyone talking to everyone else. I think it's more like just a lot of newsletters. But in any case, the point is, like, design's everywhere. No
Right.
matter what, there's design, there's architecture. And what I'm saying is, uh, the design of a platform is where you make decisions about what is allowed and what is easy and what is not, because it is agnostic of the speech, and it's going to happen anyway. It has to happen, so you might as well do it in a way that is, um, you know, getting towards goals that you care about. And when it comes to Pakistani intelligence pretending to be, I don't know, Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
um, uh, they are breaking the rules and sort of breaking the design of the system, right? The design of the system of, let's say, Facebook, explicitly says you should not pretend to be someone you're not. You should not, like, abuse rules via spam. You should not do things like rip off other people's work. And The problem isn't that they're saying X, Y, Z. The problem is that it's not the speech that's the problem, it's the behavior. And the behavior that's the problem is, the lying and the breaking of the consensus rules for how we interact with each other, like civilized in this community. And if you did not have those rules, then you're just going to turn into like the worst version of kids on a playground. Like, and we've all by entering this establishment or by just interacting with each other in society agreed to abide by certain rules, like don't punch people in the face for no reason, or like
Right.
don't lie about your name and age and background.
Yeah, right. So that makes sense to me, and that's a good way to put it, right? Like it's not that they're saying anything that wouldn't necessarily be reflected elsewhere, but if they're spending a lot of resources building up this following in misrepresenting who they are in that process, right? Like that kind of fraudulent, misrepresented behavior is something worth going after because it's having an influence that might not otherwise happen had they not misrepresented themselves.
Yeah, I think there's like it's harder on social media because speech is so close to behavior,
Right.
right? When all you can do is post. But like you can't claim freedom of speech to get out of a contract, right? You
Right.
can't claim freedom of speech to get out of sending a bomb threat or something, right? Or like extortion, right?
Right. Yeah. If you're still committing
Because
crimes in that process, and you're getting some good examples here, but
yeah,
unfortunately, we're coming up on a break
yeah.
again. All right. Thanks again for joining us here on a Free Solution Game. That with Sahar from the Integrity Institute. We're gonna be back with more in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. And a radio show, there's gonna be like music playing over that bit there because we're almost cutting it a bit close on the break.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's no worries. It's a hard format to get used to, and like I hate to cut you off. That's the only downside of a radio show versus like just a podcast where I can just kind of like
Yeah.
let it go. Okay.
That felt good though. I felt like I finally figured out my answer.
There you go. Good.
Extortion is not freedom of speech.
That's a fair point. Yeah. No, that's just because it's speech doesn't mean you're not committing a crime with doing it. And a crime of actually hurting people, because this isn't going out on the radio, but this is going to go after my other audience. Like if just because of crime, doesn't necessarily mean like it's a law that's worth having, but something like extortion, fraud, things like that, you want to stop that, right? Again, like you talked about the Ray-Ban example, right? Also fraud. It's not free speech to say like, oh, they're just talking about Ray-Bans. No, they're trying to scam you out of money. That's what it is. Or steal your information to post as you. And yeah, that stuff's worth going after.
Yeah. And to put it succinctly, I'd say like some kinds of things that look like speech are actually behavior. And it's not the speech that's the problem, it's the behavior.
That's a great point. Okay.
So we have one more segment?
One more segment.
Oh gosh, time flies.
Yeah. I mean, we keep talking after if you want. So that would just go online or in the podcast. But
I always enjoy talking to you, Kevin.
Yeah, it's a good time. Yeah, we'll go back at wait another minute. We'll go back at 40 and be out at 52. So 12-minute segment for the last one. And
what do you want to talk about?
Well, just continue that thread and then talk a little bit more about like again the hows of this, right? Like like what how's it actually work? How do you stop these folks, who are engaging in like these bad behaviors? And might review with the city metaphor a second. We'll see.
Okay. I'll just check my phone. What does this guy want from
me? All right. Back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined again by our friend Sahar from the Integrity Institute, and we're talking about making social media better. We kind of started giving a whole bunch of examples
Mhm.
of ways in which the difference between like speech and behavior. We talked about you know some of the bad actors that are out there, the whys of this. I want to talk a little bit more about the how. Again, like if you're treating social media like a city, you're taking care of it. Sahar, I want to know that you're not going to like Robert Moses our social media. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you picked up on that.
Mhm.
So like tell us again a little bit more about how that ought to work, and how what some of these like rules that can be kind of speech agnostic, but a way of controlling bad behavior from bad actors.
Yeah, and just to like preface, I'm speaking for myself. I'm the executive director of the Integrity Institute, but like we have lots of members who believe lots of things. So everything I'm saying, doesn't reflect them. It doesn't reflect the institute. I'm like hanging with my buddy, shooting the shit, not making official pronouncements about what this nonprofit thinks. We're powered by our members. I can't do that even because we have a process, and that process is not me mouthing off.
Mhm.
Um, Putting that aside,
Yes.
so you ever see The Wire?
No, I wish I had. I know.
Wow. Well, I'm just gonna assume you did, for my own purposes. So, like in The Wire, part of the like argument there is you have all these cops arresting like teenagers for low-level drug crimes. Meanwhile, like the people who are actually in charge, just are part like integrating with high society,
Mhm.
and they never touch drugs. They don't have to. They have people to do that, and so um, the conceit of the first season of the show is they finally are able to cobble together some policemen to police people to try and do a like targeted investigation of the entire operation as opposed to um, just arrested children.
Right.
And it goes into like their bosses don't really want them to, and there's a lot of pressure to like show results rather than actually solve the case. And there's like, well, if you take out this one person, this one operation, another operation will stay in this place. There's like even in using this metaphor, I'm like understanding the critiques encased in it. But part of what we want to see is more things like that and less things like Judge Dredd, right, or RoboCop, like more resources to understand these like operations and these like gangs that are operating on social media, and less just sort of like oh, you did a bad thing, I'm a badly paid worker on an assembly line, I like see the like one thing you said, give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, move on.
Right.
But that's not really gonna like
It doesn't
address.
fix the system wide problems, and there's so much of that. Like, how can you possibly like tackle like the bigger issues?
Yeah, so I think part of it is like that's sort of there's like the micro, the meso, and the macro layer. Wow, I'm sounding like an academic. You hang out with a professor for like a couple hours, all of a sudden you talk like them. Uh, so in the slightly bigger picture, you can do things like if you want to make a new account, maybe it should be a little harder. Maybe uh, before you're able to use features that could be abused, like I don't know, retweeting or Facebook groups or being a moderator of a subreddit, whatever it is, you have to get some sort of amount of like karma, right? Like the metaphor that I used in the original version of this article was you need to have a bar mitzvah, right? You need to have to go through some ritual of like declaration of like you are an adult and ready to make adult decisions.
Hmm.
Because right now what you see is someone creates an account and within like 10 minutes creates a bunch of groups, invites people to those groups, starts pumping out propaganda, and just like the cost to do bad things is so low that people are very highly incentivized to do it. Um, Another thing you can think about is like I use the metaphor of speed bumps. So social media is the city of atomic supermen. People can clone themselves. They can disguise themselves perfectly. They can not just fly, they can teleport. Um, and this makes a lot of our existing intuitions about like what is right, what is effective, what are our social norms, just like a little like they don't match. And they don't match enough that we're in this problem. So one thing that you could do is like update these norms. And we're going to do that. It's just going to take, I don't know, dozens of years. And in the meantime, we need to sort of like turn down the dial on the superpowers that people have online. And turning down the dial could look like speed bumps, right? So maybe you can't post to too many groups in the same hour, especially if
Right.
it's the same content. Maybe it's, you can only send a tenth of the number of friend requests a day as you can now. And it's not like a punishment, and this is important. It's not you're doing something wrong and we are punishing you. It's this is a thing that is probably unsafe, and like speed bumps are actually really annoying, right? But like this is a thing that we're going to do because on the whole it makes people a lot safer. And the thing that you're doing, we're not saying that you're doing anything wrong. We're saying that there's a high likelihood that it can become abused if people don't like use it in moderation.
Right.
And there's other stuff too, but those are sort of some of the flagship ideas in the piece.
Right. So I get that, right? Like the group thing, which I know Facebook already does have a feature. You do that because it annoys the heck out of my friends who want to post in
Mm-hmm.
100 groups within an hour. But but I get like why you'd have that, because that's a behavior that could be tied to something a lot more malicious or spammy. And so it's interesting to do that. The one question I'd have about this stuff too is like if like for instance, if you had creating new accounts,
Mm-hmm.
um, would you recommend, or like what are like some thoughts in your industry about like tying that to like specific identities? Like, aren't there drawbacks to that in places where like tying your identity to an account that's like criticizing regime could be actually
Mm-hmm.
dangerous? And so how do we address
Yeah.
like those types of issues?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's a consensus.
Hmm.
I think for me, like part of the problem, the real like conceptual problem is that you're trying to solve for two very different problems at the same time. You're trying to
Right.
solve for like Egypt or something where uh, maybe you want to like be LGBT without being killed,
Hmm.
and also you have a repressive dictatorial government, and so you want to like protect people from their government in that way. And then you have problems in the world we live in here, where I'd say like it's more the biggest sort of attacker is each other, and it's uh, the harassment, the like bullying, the like literal like people being radicalized to becoming domestic terrorists, stuff like that. And it's the like foreign intelligence agencies sort of like puppeteering us all through um, this the means they do. So like, how do you solve for both at the same time is kind of hard. And I'd say that for me, I don't think that tying to real ID is a good idea because it can be so easily abused, and because it like, the like the like the gay teenager problem is like real, right? Or the like government, like the like dissident intellectual problem is real in many countries, and we can't like leave them behind.
Yeah. No, I mean that's tough, and I know I that's one of the big challenges that you guys are probably going to be working on. Other people are
Mm-hmm.
thinking about this. It's not going to be solved in an hour show, but you think about like, okay, like anonymity can be a good thing and an appropriate thing in certain situations. In other situations, I know like Facebook's made me give them all my stuff to be able to run ads, right? Because they're trying to solve
Mm-hmm.
that other problem of like, we want to make sure that if someone's running ads and spending money to exert political influence, that like we know who's actually doing it, and it's not like a foreign entity trying to like have outsized influence on the election, right? I
Yeah.
although frustrating at times, I get why they're doing that. um but it's a tough challenge to solve. So we got, I don't know, a couple minutes left. Like
Mm-hmm.
what other points do you want listeners to understand about like the work that you do and things going forward? I didn't even get to ask you much about the policy stuff too. I know you said you're
Mm-hmm.
not advocating a policy position, but I didn't get to dive into that a bit. But
Yeah. Okay. So here's a few points I really want to make quickly. The
yes.
first is these companies have a ton of power, and people are right to fear them because if they choose, they can really shape the way that we talk and think, even if they're not consciously doing it much right now. And there is a way to open up like transparency into what they're up to that still respects their trade secrets and still respects people's privacy. We think we have some ideas that are really good on our website. Our website is integrityinstitute.org, and you want the resources tab. The other thing I want to say was these companies have incentive problems, and the incentive problem is they really want to maximize their core company metrics. And if you do anything to lower their company metrics, even if you're successful, every other team in the company is going to try and reverse the changes you made to make those metrics go back up again. And they'll do it unwittingly. They won't even know they're doing it, but that's part of what makes this work so hard. I don't know. Those are the two really big points I want to make.
Right on. No, that's a good point. And interesting, like the company metric side, right? It's how do you change those? And then again, because these are private companies, profitability is part of that, right? How do you change that without compromising like the integrity of the company itself? And that's the company's got to continue existing, and where do those trade-offs start to make sense? But no, this has been super interesting, and I know I feel like both times we've talked, like we've run out of time to talk about all the things we want to talk about. But again, sorry, real quick, where can people find you and in your work?
Yeah, our website is integrityinstitute.org. And my personal website is sahar.io. So that's SAHAR.io. And again,
Right
our website is integrityinstitute.org.
There you go. All right. Good plug. All right. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. We'll be back another day. All right. Thanks again for joining us. Take care.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Cool. And then that's the show bit. Unless you want to get anything else out for the online audience, that's the stuff that's going to go out over the radio.
I don't know, Kevin. Did I say anything that you want, like that you intrinsically want to discuss or feel excited about or like angry about?
The only thing I realized I never really asked you about like any of the policy stuff. You said you're going to go and talk to members of Congress and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not advocating specific policy positions. So kind of two things I want, like, one is like, and I'll try not to get you in trouble, but are there any like policy recommendations that you guys are like looking at, like any consensus that's building around any like actual changes that happen at like the national government? And then two, related to that is, what do you think of like the hearings and the discussions that take place in Congress around that? Because like my instinct is to like to make fun of the stupid sound bites around that, but I'm sure you're like listening for the legit like discussions that are going on around it. So what are your thoughts on those two things?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Last question first. I think that the hearings have gotten a lot better, and I think that people give the members of Congress and their staff too much shit about it. Like, I think like Orrin Hatch years ago asked like, Mark Zuckerberg, how do you make money? Do you sell data? And he was like, we sell ads. Like, people took that as a like, oh, idiot congressman doesn't understand how Facebook works. It's like, no, this guy's like this like Republican senator from Iowa has been a senator for like, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. He knows his shit. He's like doing the classic lawyer thing of just getting like the basics on the record and acting a little dumb to like trip his person into like revealing too much. And that's fine. I will say that some of the early hearings were really bad. And I think that the dynamic in those early hearings were politicians in both parties, to some extent, but some more than others, saw it as like, this is an exercise in order to like put pressure on Facebook to be nicer to me and my friends in social media. And that was really disappointing. The last, I don't know, year or so, they've just gotten a lot better. I think they like really got up to snuff. Like, this is the same body that regulates nuclear weapons and also like semiconductors and also like agriculture. Like, they don't need to have personal experience with these technologies to be able to like understand them. And that's where we come in. We like meet with their staff and we just like talk for hours about just like, how does it work? What are the basics? like what is a useful mental model, and it seems to be working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I mean, like, I'm a little bit more skeptical that Congress will get this right because of those bad
Oh, I didn't
incentives.
say
And
that.
no, I know. Like, but maybe the questions are at least getting better, right? Like, so maybe they're understanding. Doesn't mean they'll get it right, but at least like some of them are understanding like what's actually happening slightly better than they were a few years ago. Like, that's
I think they got a lot more sophisticated.
yeah,
I don't think that they listen. I'm not gonna. Far be it from me to bet that this or any recent Congress will get something right. But the other thing I'll say is like the thing that we're talking about. You can see on our website, right, on the resources tab.
mhm,
We have this briefing on the consensus view of integrity workers on how you would achieve transparency in social platforms. And we went through this as a real like consensus exercise, right? So a lot of people had ideas that didn't make the cut because at least one person said, I don't agree with this. And
right,
yet the thing that came out is actually pretty damn strong. And it says if you really wanted transparency, you'd have transparency on these 4 different pillars. These are examples of what it would look like. These are the specific metrics that you would ask for.
right,
And when we talk to people, they really like it. They're like, this is a lot more specific than anything we've seen so far, and it makes sense. And we are officially agnostic on like, is it self-regulation? Is it an industry body? Is it to the FTC? Is it to the UN, European Union? Like, I don't know. I don't
right.
care. And like, it's not my job to know about the trade-offs or how you write legislation well. But this is sort of the outcomes that we want to see. And we think that if you had these outcomes, then you would, as a country or like as a society, be able to like verify that they're doing a good job and also verify that they're not like putting their thumb on the scale.
Like, and I'm gonna read them off just
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of anyone who watches this part of it. Is it, and let me know if I get this one right because
Mm-hmm.
I think I got the right one. Metrics and transparency summary. It's
Yeah.
the public needs transparency from platforms to illuminate the scope and mechanisms of harmful content distribution, the role that algorithms and design choices made by platforms play in that distribution, the process within the company for making product changes that may impact that distribution. In addition, the public needs enough information such that all claims can be confirmed and validated by the public and auditors. All right, so that's what it is for anyone. I'm gonna try to post all the links to all this stuff in the actual post when this video gets premiered. But no, that's interesting. So like the mechanisms for regulating that, like, so it might be like, so it could be, like the FCC is doing it or something, right? Like Congress gives them that
Mm-hmm.
power, or like whatever social media equivalent of like Underwriters Laboratory. Like here are these people who are auditing these things, and you can trust that we're a legit organization that isn't just doing things to benefit, one of the big social media
Mm-hmm.
companies. So whatever that looks like, or if the companies themselves are being transparent enough about those processes where the public can trust that what they say or what their teams say about this stuff is true.
Yeah. Right. And we're just like, again, we're engineers, broadly defined, when it comes to like, and we have people of like lots of different politics in our group. So we're not going to agree on that, on how it happens or how it should happen. And I don't think we should.
Yeah.
Um, our job is to be the honest brokers that say like, you know, if you cared about integrity, you would want these outcomes, right? And you care about transparency, you want these outcomes.
Yeah. That's
Uh, sorry, after
That's
you.
that's interesting. Again, like trying to build that consensus among like, so it doesn't just feel like, all right, this is something coming out of like some far left or far right institute that's serving the interest of like whatever their political priors are. Which is what I worry about when I see some stuff where people attack like Section 230, and I'm like, okay, cool, but like the way you're attacking that, like that's really just meant as a way of you thinking that these social media companies will be punished for speech that you don't like, right? Like that's like the way people talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether or not that's a smart policy decision in and of itself, I think people approach it in bad faith and don't fully understand the consequences of how that affects their own side's ability to like get their message out there if we were to change the law in the way that they're proposing.
Yeah, and that gets into the beauty of the First Amendment, right? Like it's what you don't want to have happen is like political fights being of such high importance that the winner of the sort of like political battle gets to sort of decide what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. That's really bad.
Yeah.
And you know, the winner of the political battle, you know, putting pressure on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Discord, whoever about that, like that's also really bad. Um, and that gets me into something else I just want to bring up, which is like
Yeah.
integrity professionals, right? It's an emerging field. Are actual professionals, and there's a strong norm against politics, and there's a strong sort of sense of like we don't necessarily know who is in what party, but we definitely know that there's like, you know, at least some people of like every persuasion here. So like we better not get up to any shady shit because people will like whistleblow.
Right.
But also like no one gets into integrity because they like doing it for like the money and status, right? It's like a not as honored a field as, you know, just straight up product work. And so the people in it like actually care, and they like actually care about doing the right thing and like helping people. Um, and I think that's just like important to call out and just talk about how great my members are, right? Like
Yeah.
and on our advisory board is, or you know, one of our fellows is Katie Harbaugh. She worked for Rudy Giuliani for like 10 years, right? Uh, we have like an explicit commitment to talk more about international issues and avoid sort of US partisan politics frames or examples.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I did a good job today, in part because we like that's how it is, at least like in the places where I worked. Like you know, people were like tearing their hair out about like, I don't know, Ethiopia or Myanmar. Um, and then, you know, they turn on the news and people would like whine about like, you know, Facebook is censoring X because they're taking down this like stupid like media demagogues whatever page for a day, or Twitter is censoring X because they took down this like demagogue. It's like, well,
Yeah.
they don't
Marjorie
really,
Taylor Greene's account
yeah.
got shut down today, and now people are freaking out. But yeah, no, I get like compared to like what's going on in Myanmar, that's it seems sort of trivial,
Mhm.
even though like there's these issues are worth talking about. But yeah, like that's the areas where it gets
Mhm.
really frightening, and people are actually dying over this stuff.
Yeah, like the government of X is like using fake accounts to like harass, survey, and then like arrest their opposition, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, I mean, you care about the U.S. too. You live in it, but you know, why were the outcome of the Facebook papers, the thing that people really latched onto was like children on Instagram in the U.S., not anything international, and it's like understandable, but it's also like a little disappointing.
Right. No, that's fair. I mean, like with that, I'm like, well, I think there's some complicating factors on the Instagram thing, and whether or not, like that's what's a driving force behind like low, self-esteem among teenagers. But yeah, like the international stuff is like that's the stuff where like, all right, well, like where do these social media companies have a moral obligation to intervene if people are using their services to hurt others, right?
Mhm.
And like is there any accountability or liability in doing so? And then if so, like who holds them accountable and liable for this?
Yeah, like
So
incitement to genocide is like a real thing. Like
yeah,
we heard about Rwanda when we were kids and like the use of radio, and now it's sort of happening in other places around the world, and like it deserves more than a collective shrug.
right. Yeah, no, that stuff is those, those are the big things. Um but no, it's been super interesting talk to you about this stuff, and again I read some of your reports, read your papers, so it's been fascinating to see where this goes. Because it's so much a part of all of our lives now, or at least most of us. I know some
Mm-hmm.
folks have totally exited the social media space, but like both professionally and personally, I don't feel like I can or ought to do that. So if I'm going to live with this system, if we're all going to live with like this product
Mhm.
existing out there, you know, how do we make sure it's better, right? And again, the next stage of
Mhm.
that's going to be like when we get to like the metaverse stuff. All right, like how do we make sure that that's ethical and fun and also not like a terrifying nightmare? Um,
And to that, I'll just say, like, look, you can like swear off the internet completely, right? Use a cell phone, like a flip phone, for the rest of your life, and your cousin is still gonna like be on YouTube in some rabbit hole, and
right,
like, someone you've never met is gonna like believe some crazy theory and maybe like come shoot up your workplace. So it still matters.
right, yeah. I think you said at the beginning of the show, it's like even if you want to disengage from politics, like politics is still going to impact your life. I'm paraphrasing what you said, but
Yeah.
um, you know that's that's why I know many people listen to shows. Like you feel like you got to be involved with this stuff. You got to at least be aware of what's going on because even if we want to just plug our ears and tune it out, like doesn't matter. It's still going to infect. Make sure it's
Mhm.
still going to make an impact on your life.
Yeah. Oh, I know that we're wrapping up, but can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Or maybe it's not the last thing, but it just came to mind. Um, it's a little tangential, but
Go for it.
they, the enemy, the real enemy, what they want you to do is look at the people that on the other side that you think of as your enemy, and they want you to see the most cartoonish, exaggerated version of them, right? Like, so the left sees the like cartoonish version of the right sees the cartoonish version of the left, and they want you to think um, they're all like that, right? They're
Mhm.
all this dumb, they're all this crazy, they're all this like exaggerated. And common tactic we've seen is just like making sure to retweet or whatever those people, or make fake accounts pretending to be those people and act in like cartoonishly terrible ways.
Oh yeah, no, I see that stuff
Yeah.
all the time. I'm like, and to me, like my bullshit sensors go off. I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, like this is you've hit like 4 like caricature points here. Like,
Hmm.
this is fake. I know this is fake. Come on, and people share it like, oh my goodness, you see how the left is acting? Like,
Yeah.
that's a fake account. Like that's
Hmm.
I can smell it from a mile away. Why can't you? Why not? Why aren't you getting here?
Yeah. And like, we're all Americans, and we all like, you know, work together and wave hello to each other in the streets, and everything's fine. And like, um, actually, the US is pretty cool. We're all pretty cool. We're actually not that different. And like, a lot of things that, you know, you believe, the person that you're yelling at also believes, with like, a slightly different like color or flavor. And uh, I have seen with my own eyes operations that like are clearly run by foreign intelligence agencies to like pit us against each other.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, it's not great. And
Yeah.
it's just important to remember that like uh, we must hang together, or else we'll all hang separately.
Yeah. No, I mean that's I love it. That's a great way to put in. I try to I share that belief most of the time
Mm,
too. Really all the time too. That
mm,
most people are have more in common than they think, and that like your average everyday like neighbor is more likely to get along with you and be like a halfway decent person a lot of the times, or at least not want to be your enemy. And the way we act on social media, the way we like dive into like political tribalism in
mm,
some of these other spaces and start to perceive the other tribe as the true other, the irreconcilable enemy of
mm,
ourselves and the people who are like us. That's the stuff that's dangerous. And I kind of I get what you're saying with the foreign government
mm,
thing, with like continuing to drive that wedge and pour resources into driving that wedge can be dangerous because in many places like
mm.
that does become a true dividing line in which violence can happen.
Yeah. Oh, right. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second point, which is the reason they're able to do it is that social media as structured today encourages it.
Right.
And the thing I'm trying to do, among other things, is like restructure social media so that bad behavior is no longer so easy. Like, it's very easy. And the reason it's easy is because it like generates engagement, and they're all optimized to get you more engagement. And we need to find a way to get these social platforms to be tuned towards optimizing like anything other than engagement. Because
Right.
like engagement is like the sugar that people want in the short term, but in the long term, they realize, they would rather prefer, like, I don't know, roast chicken and vegetables, and like, maybe some nice fish. I don't know, not just
Yeah.
cake all the time.
So it's tough to get away from that though, because I know people like to be angry, right? Like again, the
Mm-hmm.
most prolific followers, is I remember there's a guy, Austin Peterson, who was a libertarian then a Republican for a while, and he used to post like stuff where it would be like positive news about like the movement and about the country and things that are good,
Mm-hmm.
and that stuff all did terrible. And he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know why I post negative news about the party and about the country all the time? Because that's what gets good engagement. That's what drives traffic to the site, pushes ads, and keeps my business alive.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, guys, the optimistic stuff isn't keeping my mortgage paid.
Yeah.
Basically, and I'm kind of paraphrasing him a bit, but so like those sort of incentives are like, is it inherent to human behavior that we want to see the negative stuff because that's our monkey brain just saying like, I need to know the danger because that's more important compared to just normal everyday interactions that don't push on that button of saying like, you need to be aware of this danger of the enemy out there, of whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Thousands of years ago, Homer wrote an epic about the sirens, and how Odysseus, said, I know that I'm going to try and do this thing, and I want you to like lash me to the mast so I don't like, do a thing that my long-term brain doesn't want, but my short-term brain will like override. And it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They're like things that get high engagement doesn't mean things that people want. Things
Right.
that high engagement are just things that get high engagement. And we need to find ways to get out of these like doom boxes, because they're thousands of engineers diligently working, and their bonuses are tied to making systems that are making the engagement metrics go up. And there's only a few people on the other side trying to say, can we make any other metric go up instead? Can we like
Right.
sacrifice engagement for like, anything, social harmony, like not killing each other,
Any of those things.
anything.
So, I will say this though, before we
Mm-hmm.
eventually call this episode to go, like part of the reason I stayed on TikTok, I joined because I
Mm-hmm.
need to understand it for my job. But
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I stayed on is because TikTok has figured out that I don't really want to see politics. Like,
Yeah.
so I'll see stuff about animal facts and dad stuff and like homesteading, whatever. And that's all like they show me that sort of stuff. When I see the politics stuff, I usually don't like dwell on it too much. And you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's right. Like, I don't need to be angry. Like stuff that makes me angry, stuff that makes me stressed most of the time, I usually skip it on there. And maybe
Yeah.
other people are thinking about the same thing. It's like I got off of it. If I want to be angry, I'll be on Facebook. I'll go on Twitter,
Yeah.
whatever. I can go start a fight on Twitter
Mm-hmm.
if I want to scratch that itch. But yeah, I mean, maybe other platforms will figure that out. I know TikTok that has their own issue with that sort of
Yeah.
stuff too, but it'd be interesting to see if like we can figure out like again what long term what actually makes sense, and do people want to stay on the platform long term because they makes them feel optimistic, it inspires them creatively, and it's it's a way to connect with people around the world and understand experiences that they might not otherwise be able to get. So that's a cool thing. Like I'm generally a
Mm-hmm.
believer in social media. I'm not like negative on it, but I see the problems that you're trying to solve, and it's cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we had good social media in the past. We could have it again. We're fundamentally optimistic. Or we just got to do it. It's not that hard.
All right. Well, all right. We'll call this episode closed, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not that hard. Get to it, man. Start making it happen. I know you are.
I mean, like when I'm, VP of engineering at like, I don't know, Reddit, we can talk.
There we go. All right. So when that happens, and when you're solving the problems, you let me know, and we'll talk about how it's happening.
Word.
All
See you,
right.
Kevin.
Thanks, sir.